Welcome back to another video tutorial regarding RPGFL, and we're going to carry on from the last episode where we did some animation stuff. So we're going to actually finish that off in this tutorial, at least try to anyway. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see, well, first of all, before I go any further, as you can see, I've got this program called Simple Edit, which I actually created myself. Just thought I'd make things a little easier for myself, and the reason why is because I tend to find things like Flash Develop to just be very slow sometimes. And that's especially true when it that's especially true when we're trying to compile and do some error checking, and sometimes it doesn't even work, and autocomplete can be quite slow as well. So I've decided to go against using Flash Develop purely because of performance. So I'm going to be using my own editor. This is actually using the Fast Colored Text Box library, but I'm not going to get into too much of this. Instead, what I'm going to do is carry on from last time. So as you probably saw in the previous tutorial, we had this class called Animation, which did extend sprite. I actually changed it back to bitmap again because I felt that that might actually be better. And what I'm going to do, in fact, this can be a new bitmap. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I want to basically make sure that this animation class works like a bitmap. The reason why is because when we're using sprites, we're using something that's slightly more expensive, and we want to be able to use the least memory as humanly possible. And animations don't need to be interactive, they don't need to be sprites, they can very easily be bitmaps. So I'm gonna go back to bitmaps. So if I go back into, let's take a look here. Is it? Oh, I need to cd out. If I open our main here, as you can see, we've got our player, which is being drawn with this. So I'm just going to quickly test this just to see if everything's okay. So there's two different types of commands in this simple editor. One is CMD and one is CMDS. Now CMDS basically means separate the task to a separate window. So when I do CMDS, I can do hexlib run. In fact, I need to actually be outside of this folder before I do that. So CMDS hexlib run OpenFL build project.xml. And we're targeting Nico, aren't we? So as you can see, when I do CMDS, it does everything in a separate CMD window, and then we'll be able to see the results in this particular window. If we wanted to see the results somewhere else, such as in here, for example, then we'd be able to see that. So that looked like it completed successfully. So what I'm going to now do is cd into bin Windows Nico, and then do cmd s start, and then we've got RPGFL tutorial or something like that. Hang on. Or we could just go into here and double click on this. So let's take a look and see. So as you can see, it's still working. The bitmap still applies, so that's all good. Now as you can see, the character is a bit off, so I want to fix that at some point, but I'm not hugely concerned about that right now. What I want to do is get the animation part a bit done. The reason why is because I started with animations, so there's a good reason to actually, oops, I don't want to save it there either. So what I want to do is, if we go back to core, we're going to take a look at animation. So in here we're going to complete our animation thing. So we only did the public function switch state, which will basically, we will go through each of the states that exist. We're going to check to see if the name that we pass in is going to be the same, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get the first state, or the first index in that animation state, and then display that first animation state. Now I did actually complete a few things in the assets. So if we go over to our assets, I'll just double click this, why not? So if we go over in here, you'll see that I've actually decided to go ahead and complete this JSON file, so we'll be able to just simply implement all of the animations that we want our player character to do, and also do the events for moving the character up and down, so that we can see that in action. So if we go back here into our animation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another function and this time we're going to say play. Right, so again we're going to get a state name of type string. We're going to say whatever the start index is, and whether or not we're going to repeat. So we're going to say, okay, the repeat, a repeat of 0 is going to mean infinite. So again, we're going to need to check to see if that state name exists. Obviously, because I'm not using auto-completion, it does mean that if I don't know what something is, then I will probably need to take a look at it on the Hakes API, and it's actually good practice to do that, because then at least that way you're more likely to remember things easier than you are with, let's say, auto-completion. But then again, that's just my opinion. So we check to see if that state name exists, and then what we want to do is get the first state. So just like above, we're going to get the first state. So we're going to say states.get state name, and that is going to be start index, right, because that's the first value that we want to get. So in a way, all we want to do is simply copy and paste this. But in addition, what we want to do is actually get a timer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import from OpenFL.utils.timer, and up here I'm going to say private var timer. Oh god, timer, and oh stupid Apple update, go away. And we're also going to have a few other variables as well. So the timer is going to allow us to animate our state, whichever the state is, right? So what we want to do is we want to check to see what the state is, which state we're actually playing. So we probably want to capture that. So we're going to say current state, which is going to be of type string. And what I'm also going to do is we want to get the indexes I forgot to copy this, otherwise it won't work. So yeah, we also need to get, as I mentioned, one of the indexes, because when we take a look at this, we want to be able to record which index we were last on and then check that. So we're going to say current index, that is going to be an int. Okay, so once we've done that, what we want to do is we want to set up our timer. We might as well just do it up here. So timer is equal to new timer, which takes two parameters. The first one is going to be the milliseconds that it's going to take for this timer to get from one tick to another tick, if that makes sense. So if you imagine a clock ticking, it's going to take 500 milliseconds to get from one place to another, for example. So in this case, the default is in fact going to be 500 milliseconds, and it's also going to be 0 for the second parameter, which means it's going to repeat infinitely. Or we could just leave that alone because we don't need it. The default value is actually 0 anyway. So once we've done that, what we want to do is down here we want to say timer.repeat is equal to repeat, because that's the actual repeat value, which obviously determines whether or not the timer is going to repeat or not. And then what we also want to do is we want to add an event listener to the timer, which is going to have a timer event, which we actually have to import. So OpenFL.events timer event, and if we go down here, what I'm going to do is in timer event we're going to say timer event.tick, and that is going to take a function. So I'm going to get a private function, next animation, and that is going to be, that's going to take a parameter of type E. So I'm just going to copy and paste that into there, and then obviously that attaches to that. So let's just be sure that I'm actually getting the repeat bit correct. So first of all, what I want to do is make sure that the current index is set to our start index. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so once we've done that, what we want to do Yeah, I checked to see if that is correct. Yes, I know I've got tons of stuff here. I'm learning how to use Nico to produce websites, and then I'll provide tutorials on that as well. What did I want to look for? api.hags.org. There we go. Oh no, I want docs.openfl.org. So if we go into OpenFL, utils, timer, should be a repeat. It's repeat count. Okay. So we'll say repeat count there. So in our next animation, what we want to do is when we're playing this event, what we want to do is we want to, first of all, we actually need to start the timer. Might be a good idea. Which will start the timer if it is not already running. So in our next animation, what we want to do is for every tick that the timer event does, so for every 500 milliseconds, we want it to animate to the next frame. So we wanted to check a few things first. First of all, we want to see if current index, if we add 1 to current index, and that's going to be greater than indexes.length, right? So the reason why we're doing that, and in fact that actually needs to be -1. So indexes, as you know, takes a variety of values, right? If we scroll back up here, indexes is an array of points, and those points are identified inside, or actually, do we? No, we don't do it with the indexes, do we? Because the indexes are, no, we don't. Yeah, that's correct. We don't need to do that. Do it like that. Now, what we want to do is we want to record the number of values within our state. So how many indexes there are in the state. So what we want to do is when we play it, let's remove this for the time being. I will replace this with state, and then we'll do var first is equal to states, like that. So what I want to do is I want to check the length of that state. So I'm going to add another private variable. Actually, I don't think I even need to do that. So what I'm going to do is current state length. This is going to be an int. So current state length is going to be equal to the length of that variable, right? So state.length. So we want to check to see how many indexes there are in this given state, because what we want to do is when we animate it, we want to go into the next frame, right? Now what I might also do is grab another variable which is going to say go back, which is going to be a ball, and by default it's going to be false. So what's that going to do? So what I'm going to do, var go back, which is a ball, going back, which is going to be another ball. So basically the idea is, if you remember, if we go back to our sprite sheet, which is in here, image, sprite sheets. So if we take a look, as you can see, let me just double click this and open it. So as you can see, we've got our animated, when we animate it, if we didn't have, let's say, a going back variable, then what we would do is we would return back to the previous frame. So the first frame in that index, and then go left, and then left again, and then go back to the previous frame again, and all sorts of different things. So instead of doing that, what we would do is, when we go from index 0 to index 1, and then from index 1 to index 2, instead of going then back to index 0, we then do index 2 to index 1, index 1 to index 0, then 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 1, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what the going back variable would do. So we want to do a few checks first. We want to see if we're doing this or not. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say going back is going to be not going back, which basically reverses the Boolean value on going back. So by default, going back is going to be false. So that's already going to be at the default anyway. So when we start the animation, we're going to be standing still to start with. So we only want to do that if go back is actually true. If it's not, then what we want to do is we want to just say current index is equal to 0, right? Because we're going to be returning to index 0, like I mentioned. We're going to then do another check, which is going to be if current index is less than 0, then we want to again do the check if go back and going back is going to be equal to not going back, when it finally works. Or we are going to say current index is going to be equal to going to be equal to 0. So we'll just keep it like that for the time being. And then what we want to do is we want to do basically this same operation here, which is getting the state, getting a bitmap. That's actually supposed to be bitmap data, not bitmap. Same here as well. This needs to be bitmap data. Okay, so yeah, we want to be able to do that same operation. So what I might actually do is create another function which does that for us. So we're going to say get state animate. So I'm going to copy and paste this. So I'm just going to quickly do a few things here. So what I want to do is I want to get the state name. It's going to be of type string. We're also going to get a start index. which by default is going to be 0, and I think that's all we need for this. Certainly looks that way. Okay, so now all we do is just do get state animate, which is going to be state name, start index, right? Then we do the same for this one here as well. We'll do the same operation for both of them because we might as well, considering. So we'll switch states and then we play the state, right? So if we just want to switch a state, i.e. get another image within a series of still images, then that's what we might want to do, just do switch state. If we want to actually play an animation, then obviously we would do this. And then we might actually want to do something like public stop, which stops the animation. So in here, all we're just going to do is say timer.stop, right? Which stops the timer. The remaining number of repetitions. So maybe the better idea would be to reset, actually, thinking about it. So once we've done all these checks for the current index, what we're then going to do is do that same thing. So we're going to do get state animate. So we're going to say get state animate current. We are going to need it. Private current state name string. Let's go down here and say current state name is going to be state name, like that. That should be fine. Certainly looks that way. Okay, so yeah, we're going to use current state name, and then we're also going to use current index, right? So we're doing these operations else. What we're going to do is we're going to say current index. So we're going to check to see if we are going back. That's also if go back is true as well. So if we are going back, then what we want to do is we want to check to see if so we want to do current index minus minus, right? Which basically provides that we are in fact going back. What I might want to do is do current index minus 1 there, to do that operation. So if we are going back, then we're going to minus 1, we're going to decrement 1 on current index. If we're not going back, i.e. going forward, then we're going to say current index plus plus. And that's actually regardless of whether or not going back is true, and regardless of whether or not, and regardless if we're going back. So can't do that. So I'm going to save that. So now what I want to do is, if we go back to our player, which is going to be openplayer.hx. So if we go up here, we'll see here that we've got anim switch state. So what I want to do now is I want to create a public function which is going to be update, right? And I want to pass in the delta time, so the time it takes to get from one frame to another, which is going to be a float. And then what I want to do is I want to actually create another class. So first of all, I am going to type in key state, right? So in key state, what I want to do is I want to be able to just simply know whether or not a particular key is up. And the reason why is because we want to be able to check to see whether or not a key is up or not. If you remember back in the second tutorial when we actually started doing all this programming stuff, just after I did all that XML explanation, we managed to get a white rectangle to move up and down and all sorts of different stuff like that. And one of the problems was that we had to actually do these Boolean checks to see if value was up or key value was down and stuff like that. So in order to prevent that from happening, what we're going to do is we're going to actually get this class here which is going to provide us with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say import OpenFL dot, is it in utils? The keyword I'm looking for. No. UI? Yes, it's in UI. Okay. UI.keyboard. What I'm also going to do is get a keyboard. Actually, we don't need a keyboard event. What am I talking about? So all I'm going to do is in here I'm going to say public static function is key up. So we want to check to see if key code is currently up or not. So what we want to do is in keyboard, if we go over to keyboard here, we've got all of these values here, right? Which will provide us with these values, these integer values. Now, if I remember correctly, there's also another function somewhere that allows us to get a key value. So what we could do is we could get the key, the value of the integer from this value here, or from whichever it is. I will be right back because this is probably going to take a while.